Ultimately, with something like a business sale and things like seller financing and earnouts, you need to trust that the person that's buying is actually going to follow through on the deal. Of course, that's something that we were extremely pleased with. Subsequently, obviously, things have worked out, I'd say, decently well, and we've been very happy. So that was, I think, going into the sales process, I would have anticipated that it would have been a process of, okay, list, find the highest price, accept it, right? When really, I wasn't expecting how much of it was about trust in the buyer.
Today, we're diving deep into the story of Sendtric, which started as a simple SaaS selling countdown timers for emails and is becoming a hub for turning emails into personalized and interactive experiences. I'm happy to introduce you to Eric Pauley, the founder of Sendtric, recently PhD from University of Wisconsin and CEO of DScope Security. Eric, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me on, Pascal. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you, always. To start this episode, maybe we can talk about how does somebody who had a PhD in computer security start a project on countdown timer for emails 7 or 8 years ago?
Yeah, it's such a funny backstory. The whole thing almost came about by accident, I remember. So Justin, my co-founder, he and I have actually been working together for a really long time, all the way back from running Minecraft servers in high school to a couple of one-off projects that we did. And none of those ever really took off all that much, but it was during my first year of college, actually, in undergrad at Penn State, when we were, I guess, just sitting around chatting one day, and he mentioned to me, hey, I received this email recently that had this countdown timer in it, right? And immediately I thought, oh, I'm really curious, how does that actually work, right? Because, of course, emails are just text and HTML and sort of static, right? They get sent to your inbox and they're saved. And I wondered, okay, how can there actually be dynamic content that's changing all the time inside an email? And so originally, this all just started as an engineering sort of code curiosity for me, right? And I looked at how this was being implemented. I think it was actually what continues to be a competitor of Sendtric now. And I looked at how it was implemented, and really they were generating these animated images all the time. And what stood out to me was that sort of from the way that they were caching these images, I could tell that this must be a really expensive process for them and that they were trying to generate as few unique images as possible. And I thought to myself, well, there's sort of got to be a better way, right? And again, this was my engineering hat, sort of computer science side of things. And so as sort of a weekend project, I remember Justin and I effectively put together a little prototype, just sort of a hacky server that would generate these new countdown timers. And I had some cool ideas for how we would sort of make it much more optimized than a lot of the existing players in this space. And, we got this thing working in a weekend, maybe two, and we just put it up there on the internet as this sort of free site that you could go in. You couldn't even make accounts. You just filled out a form and it would give you the timer. And I still remember, I think on Web Archive or something, there's a copy of that original website, and it looked exactly like a first year undergrad would sort of make for a website, right? It looked terrible. And I remember Justin went on the subreddit for email marketing, and he just posted a link to this as sort of a fun project. Like, look, here's my side project, email timers, go try it out. That was sort of it at the beginning. It was just this project. And then what happened was, of course, we were the only free player in this space, right? Everybody started using this thing, and they started using it in little test emails, campaigns with, small numbers of recipients. And over the next year and a half, slowly it just started growing and snowballing on its own. People started using it for larger and larger campaigns. Almost sort of happened by accident there, right? And eventually what we found was that we were being used, this little website made by a couple of college students, right? We were being used for major campaigns by real companies. And yeah, that sort of brings us to, okay, what do we actually do with this? And is this...
And you started to monetize after 6 months to a year, right? Like we started charging...
Yeah, so we had sort of two phases of monetization, right? So the first was we had this free product out there and really weren't thinking about it as a business. But then major companies like large US retailers, food service chains, and so on actually came to us and said, hey, we love this product, but we can't use it in production because we need to have contracts with all our suppliers. And so we have to pay you. And so we started doing some monetization with just a couple of retailers where we said, okay, you can mail us a check, and we'll give you paid access to this product. And I think that happened around 2016 timeframe, so sort of year after we'd sort of got started on it. And Justin and I was in Colorado working at a startup that Justin worked at the time as an intern, and so we were actually in the same place then, and we were sort of really enjoying this kind of growth that we had. But yeah, it wasn't until we had a couple of those one-offs and we had sort of this continued growth that I think around late 2017 is when we really started to think, hey, okay, clearly people will pay for this product. We just need to make an actual flow for accepting money. And so that sort of started the complete redesign of Sendtric from being this single page that you just fill out a form into this full sort of account and platform and everything that we can bill for. And so, yeah, it was sort of in that early 2018 timeframe that we built out the product, accepted payments, did the Stripe checkout integration. And I remember turning on this platform for the first time. Initially, we effectively released it as a beta product where people could still sign up for free and they had accounts. And then I remember in 2018, effectively when we flipped the switch and said, hey, now if you make accounts, you have to pay for it. And that was such an exciting step, right? I really, after putting so much work in, I really wondered, okay, is anyone actually going to pay for this thing, or do we just put in all this work for nothing? And I just remember the first couple of days when we got a couple of micro account signups, those $9 a month, right, 2 or 3 a day. That was really exciting. And then I think maybe 2-3 days in of accepting payment, we got our first power customer sign up, that $50 a month range. And man, that was exhilarating, right? The fact that this product that we had, people would actually pay, what for me as an individual was quite a real amount of money. For something that I had written. This was the first time that, someone was actually willing to directly buy something that I had done, which was incredibly exciting.
Obviously, you've had great growth after that. What were some of the moments that gave you pause, like that, where you were a little bit more nervous?
I think that one of the things that really sort of weighed on me throughout the entire process of growing the business, and well, actually there were two. So number one was sort of the technical aspect of things, right? So I designed this platform and effectively I was lead engineer, CTO, one man show for the technical side of things. And the fact that we were increasingly having not only organizations, but large organizations and paying customers using our platforms for critical email campaigns, and that this was something that we had deployed just on a couple of, VPSs on a second tier cloud provider. This is something that increasingly worried me, especially because, if something went down, I was the only person who could fix it, right? And that meant that at any hour of the day, I could get a text on my phone that said, oh, Sendtric is down, and I had to deal with it. There were multiple times where at 2 a.m., I had a big alarm go off on my phone and had to fix Sendtric, and people were sending us emails complaining. And so running such a sort of critical piece of infrastructure as a single engineer was pretty taxing. The second was, I think, that we were increasingly starting to see systemic risk, right? So Sendtric, a nice thing about it was that it was organic growth, right? We just put it out there and we became very close to the top of Google for email countdown timers. And that was great. We got a ton of customers just for free without doing anything. But that also meant that increasingly my livelihood, my source of income, was based on a position on Google search rankings, right? Which is an incredibly tenuous position to be in. That made it very difficult for us to sort of explore and innovate on the pricing structure of the product, as an example, right? So we initially had this free tier of the product, and that came out of our initial demo that we just posted online. And Justin and I were really worried that the only reason we were on the top of Google was because we had this extremely generous free tier. And so the problem then was that even though we had a paid tier, very, very large businesses, we're talking up in Fortune 50, were using our free tier for multi-million recipient campaigns. And so on the one hand, clearly there was a huge amount of lost revenue, but at the same time, we were feeling so incredibly risk averse because this was, single stream of business. Yeah, and so that was a frustration, but also something that definitely weighed on me over time.
And you had to do the support, right? You were doing the support.
Oh man, I forgot about the support. Yeah, so the support, it's a challenging product to provide support for, right? Because it is a technical product both in its construction and its usage. It's kind of taking advantage of some quirks in the way that emails work, right? I mean, when people designed emails, no one designed email for countdown timers, right? And so sometimes things would break in strange ways. We had customers who were email marketing people who understand how to use MarTech software, but that certainly we couldn't just tell, okay, this is how HTML email spec works, and you need to, understand that. So being able to communicate to customers with both an engineer hat, a customer success hat, and a sales hat, that was challenging for me, right? And it was a new area that I had to grow into, but also, I mean, it was just sort of, again, a 24/7 load on both of our time. Um, Email marketers, of course, when they have issues, they want resolutions very quickly, even if they're only paying $9 a month. And so this was just a constant all day, every day, me having to check support emails and reply to these. And although I don't think this was actually true, it felt like we couldn't really outsource it, right? Because of that sort of technical aspect and sort of the specificity of it. I think looking back, I think we talked about this during the sales negotiation process too. I think looking back, we probably could have outsourced that support side and the sales side more than we actually did. And that's something with hindsight that we probably would have seen more growth and been more successful, and it would have been less stressful for me if we had sort of tried to grow in that way. And I remember that was one of the key questions that you asked during the sales process is, okay, you're telling me that this is weighing on you and you need to get out of it, but why don't you just hire salespeople? Why don't you just hire support people? And it was a good question, right? I mean, when you asked that, it really genuinely made me think, oh, why don't we do that? Um, of course, at the time, there were kind of all those other factors, right? I mean, there's systemic risk. There's the fact that I'm trying to go through my grad student career and everything. And so the combination of those factors still meant it was time to sell. But yeah, I think we probably could have had more sort of early and ongoing success if I'd embraced sort of growing in those ways, bringing on people.
And then in 2022, early 2022, you started to look for an exit and you listed the business on Acquire, right?
Yeah. So that was Justin's idea. So in fall 2021, that's when we really started being attuned to sort of systemic risk that was happening in the email marketing space,
Yeah.
right? So emails are very much sort of a duopoly or maybe just mix of a couple of major providers, Microsoft, Google, Apple. And we were seeing sort of inklings of changes in the technical landscape that could lead to issues with things like dynamic email elements. So that was something we were increasingly worried about, again, with it being sole stream of income, sole business. And then sort of early 2022, yeah, Justin was looking at, okay, how feasible is it to actually sell a company like this? Because another thing that was sort of in our mind was, okay, maybe for small businesses like this, it's not actually possible to sell at a reasonable price, right? Because, me and the stuff that I'm doing and the stuff that Justin is doing is so much of the value of the business that, how realistic is it to actually expect someone else to run this thing? But it was sort of around 2022 that we looked at platforms like MicroAcquire and looking at people that were interested in buying this sort of size of SaaS business. And of course, there were a lot of people that clearly weren't serious, that they weren't going, and there were a lot of companies listed on things like MicroAcquire that weren't very serious offerings. But we figured we'd go for it and we'd post and list. And I think that we didn't actually sort of list with a specific price. We were just curious what people would come back with. And of course, you reached out, and I believe one or two other interested parties reached out. And it was very clear that you were the most serious sort of potential partner here, right? Other buyers, they made somewhat similar offers, but we just really didn't feel like we could trust them. Because ultimately, I mean, with something like a business sale and things like seller financing and earnouts, you need to trust that the person that's buying is actually going to follow through on the deal. And of course, that's something that we were extremely pleased with. Subsequently, obviously, things have worked out, I'd say, decently well. and we've been very happy. So that was, I think going into the sales process, I would have anticipated that it would have been a process of, okay, list, find the highest price, accept it, right? When really I wasn't expecting how much of it was about trust in the buyer.
I think it's something that is easy to forget, because of course you want to get the maximum amount of money, but especially when there is a part of the amount that is not a fixed amount, you need to trust that the person is going to do a good job. You still care about the customers, so you want them to be treated well, and it's a little bit your baby. So you want the baby to go to somebody who will care for your baby, not just whoever wants to buy it for more.
No, absolutely. I think to some extent it was also on our minds, like, okay, this is a product that I care somewhat deeply about, right? And so I think that, for instance, one discussion that we had during the sales negotiation process was, okay, are you going to keep the free tier, right? And what's that going to look like? I think another question that we asked was, we had a couple of nonprofits signed up that had free access that they were using for like solid, good campaigns that were helping the world become a better place, right? And so I do believe that we asked, okay, what's going to happen to our nonprofit accounts? And so, yeah, it is also sort of protecting the legacy of the product and this thing that we've built up over time. I think it comes back to this idea of risk, right? And so many times over the course of Sendtric, the decisions that we made weren't necessarily in pursuit of sort of maximizing expected return. They were more risk mitigation, right? And so exactly in the case of sales, it's not just top of line price, it's how likely are we to get that. In the case of the free tier, it's not just, okay, how do we maximize revenue? It's how do we sort of protect this income stream? And I think that to some extent we made the right decisions there, and that fundamentally Justin and I had to be more risk averse. But on the other side, I think that in sort of the structuring of the product, we probably could have taken more risk, right? So on the free tier sort of post-acquisition side of things, my impression is that you've had incredible success just tweaking the free tier in these really minor ways that have boosted conversion. And I think that the risk of that was actually lower than we anticipated, and that we should have just done it. I do also think that a sort of comparative advantage that Nusa Labs has in acquiring Sendtric is that, of course, Sendtric is part of a larger portfolio, right? And so fundamentally, you've been able to take more risks with the product. You've been able to amortize a lot of these sort of one-off duties over a larger team. You've been able to put effort into exploring, say, specific things that enterprise customers are interested in, right? And so I think that that's been really, I guess, sort of really heartening for me with the sale, right? Is that going into that process, I kind of worried that it would be a zero-sum game, right? And that we'd be selling it to someone who'd be just as sort of able to carry on the product as we were, or in the worst case, like worse than we were. And so fundamentally, it was a negotiating process of, okay, how much value could we extract from this sales process? But I think that something that I really enjoyed about the sale was that it was very clear to me, even pre-acquisition, that what we were really doing is we were selling this product to someone who was going to be able to do greater things with it, right? They were going to be able to embrace the sales cycle. They were going to be able to bring on enterprise customers, and they were going to be able to take risks with the product that we weren't going to. And so that sort of made the sale feel like a win-win to us because, of course, we're getting percentage earn-out of future revenue. And so, yes, okay, we're not getting 100% of the revenue anymore, but we had some trust that Nusa Labs was going to be able to grow the top line in a way that effectively, made it work out for both of us. And I mean, certainly the deal went through, so I'm sure that you kind of felt the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it did, and I mean, it was an interesting time. We signed, I think, the day before Russia invaded. We signed the LOI the day before Russia invaded Ukraine.
Yeah, I'm curious. So, of course, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this. So I mean, Justin and I were very worried that you would back out of the deal whenever that happened, right? Because clearly, I mean, multiples changed, macroeconomic factors were, it ended up being, I think, in the macro landscape, a little bit more of a blip than it felt at the time, right? But it felt pretty bleak when that happened.
I mean, and I would say today would have been worse because the multiples have gone down a lot in the last 3 years. But I would say, I mean, for me, the big thing is one of the main thing I observed is that the founder I'm buying from is the person, like the business is going to be like that person. And so, because the company is so small, it's like a few people. And so, if a person is risk averse, then there's going to be some risk aversion in the pricing, in some aspect of a product. If a person is thoughtful, which clearly you and Justin are, then it's going to show in some of the technical decisions or business decisions, etc. If a person is messy, there's going to be a mess in the business. And so, one thing that we've observed is really that understanding, okay, what is the personality of a founder matters because it will be in the product. And we've acquired 6 businesses over the years. And frankly, it doesn't disappoint me. Every time the craziness or the messiness of a founders are in the product, the cleanliness, the OCD dimension of a founders are in the product. And so, it's about how much are you willing to tolerate in a way. And I don't think that the Ukraine, the Ukraine invasion worried me that much. But yeah, it was an emotional process. It was, before Sendtric, we were acquiring businesses that were smaller, more like in the 12, 14K MRR. This business was over 20K MRR. So it was our biggest acquisition. The price all in, if we had which will be the case, it was a higher multiple than everything that we've bought before and after, and it's the highest dollar amount. I mean, period. Of all our acquisitions, it has been the higher dollar amount. Period. Like full stop. So it was a little bit scary. I think that in hindsight, the risk of Apple and Google on the business, I didn't foresee. Like if you look back at myself today, like what question should I have asked you? Clearly, I should have asked you that question. It didn't damage us that much, but I should. I think that as you build trust in the process, unless something dramatic changes, like for example, there's a recession, no e-commerce, or something like that, then there is no reason to just rescind the offer.
Yeah. So I'd love to dive a little bit more into that platform risk side of things, right? Because of course, I listened to the podcast on web messages, right? And that's a case of incredible platform risk, right? You're tied into one single platform. Email marketing is a little bit in the middle, right? Because you're tied to sort of a duopoly of platforms. Of course, there's a lot of opportunity to platforms, right? Because it gets you direct access to market. It allows you to sort of standardize your product around one offering. What do you think? I mean, knowing what you know today, are you still interested in leaning into sort of acquisitions of platform companies, or are you leaning a little bit more toward sort of away from that?
I mean, I would say the last acquisition we did is tied to Telegram and Discord, so there are platform risk in that way. I think that for WhatsApp, the biggest issue for me was not that product was not playing by the rules. It was kind of at the fringe of the rules, and that's something that for sure I will not touch. We had the opportunity to acquire after the Sendtric acquisition, like a CRM for OnlyFans creators. And it happened that I was negotiating the LOI just at the time that we got the WhatsApp cease and desist letter. And I can tell you that one of the first thing I did after I got the cease and desist letter was send an email to the founder of that business and saying, I'm sorry, I can't do that deal. It was almost like a message, like a divine message saying, don't do that deal. Yeah, I wouldn't do something that is in the gray area. And when it's not in the gray area and there's a platform risk, first, there's a pricing component that I would include so that I'm not taking too much of a long-term risk. So the multiple would go down. Maybe the earnout would be higher, and as a percentage of the whole transaction. And I also think that I would really think deeply into how strategic this is for that business versus not. In this case, like and we can talk about what we wanted to do with Sendtric and what I've learned about that. I would say that had I known about that risk earlier, what I would have done differently is that I would have expanded the platform faster. So we bought this business in May 2022. We get a very nice bump. I mean, this business is very seasonal. So obviously for Black Friday, Cyber Monday of 2022, the business does well. 23 does amazingly well. But around 23 is when Apple actually became even more stringent on countdown timers or on GIF and images in email. And that's where I think we should have last year in 2024 expanded into more of like other personalized email tools, which is what we're doing today. So polls, personalized images, scratch off all these things, in order to make sure that our customers see us not as a point solution, but more of a suite of items that they can use. And that's how we are currently trying to, I would say, de-risk the business. And so to make sure that we have as many customers as possible, realize that they're not paying for one thing, but they're paying for an ensemble of things, I would say. And in hindsight, we should have done earlier, if anything, for the reason that you just outlined, that this risk that we didn't see, that we touched, and that we really fell, I would say, in the holiday season of last year, where growth was lesser for us. And I checked, I have the contact of a few of our competitors. They saw the same thing. And I think that the demand was less because of the Apple issue. So we still had a very strong end of year. The growth is still there, but I think that, we should have, I would say, de-risk our business earlier. And that's a lesson that I'm taking from these last 3 years.
Yeah, I do. I think that expanding into those other offerings, it's clearly worthwhile from a sort of de-risking standpoint. I also do think it's kind of embracing where emails and email marketing are potentially going, right? So my observation is that there's increasingly email marketing being done in sort of this gray area between transactional and sort of subscription-based marketing email, right? Where effectively you have some transactional component that's leading to the marketing upsell, right? And so adding these other components like polls and, like you said, scratch offs and other interactive elements that can make those transactional emails sort of more effective as a marketing tool, it feels like more than just de-risking, right? It's a new opportunity. I am curious. Yeah, so Sendtric historically has been sort of these widgets, right, that you can put into any HTML email editor, and you can expand out with other HTML widgets as you're doing. How does that work, I guess, in terms of being just sort of this standalone provider where someone needs an email editor right under the hood? Are you considering expanding into like a complete email editor space, or is that, obviously that's a huge expansion of the product, or is it possible to exist as one of these widget providers in the context of sort of other email editor providers? And I guess that also comes into, okay, what's the integration story? What share of email editors are you able to integrate these sorts of tools with meaningfully versus being sort of manual integrations?
When I was looking at what we had in mind when we bought the business. Okay, we thought that we could grow the business on multiple dimensions. We thought that you had enterprise demand and you were not meeting that demand because enterprise, they have sales processes, they want different features for a product, they need more users, they need templates, they need different things. So that's one thing that we had as a quick win, and we implemented that and we've been successful with it. We thought that your free tier was very generous and the pricing was not only cheaper than the competitor, but like way cheaper. So what we did was we increased pricing, not for the, so we made the free tier go from, like you need before in your case, if you had a million people in your list and a 10% open rate, you didn't need, a free tier was enough. There were multiple French airlines which were using the free version of Sendtric, and I was really pissed about it. And so I said, okay, these guys, we can pay $9 a month. It's fine. They're charging me more for my Coke when I fly with them. So we moved to 10,000 so that a true SMB, I mean, they have at best 100,000 people in their list. It's fine. They will never have to pay. But if you have a list that is meaningful, you pay $9. It's fine. It's not like a big deal. So I think that's one thing that we did that also helped revenue, and we increased the price for the mid tier and top tier, not the small tier. But the $9 plan is still the $9 plan, and we didn't want to move that, and we have no intention to do that. So these were the quick wins. There are things that I thought would happen that didn't materialize as much as I thought. Like we wanted to have an API so that other email service providers or email editor could use us. And we had some success, but it has been very limited. Like if I look at the amount of time we spent building this versus the amount of revenue we got, I would say it's kind of a wash, but it's not like a super strong ROI. But I do think a few things. One, that with AI, email service providers will want to orchestrate more of a different elements. Because if you're going to say to your AI, hey, I want to do a campaign for blah, 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 these are my brand assets and everything, then you need to have all the tools at your disposal. Like if you're an orchestra, AI is an orchestra. I mean, sure, they could use MCP servers and stuff like that, but frankly, you're better off having your clarinet and your violin and your drums and everything around you so that you can actually play them here versus have them on Zoom and they come when necessary. So I think that's going to be important, even though many projects were put on pause 2 years ago because all of a sudden they deprioritize countdown timers and they reprioritize everything around email creation and AI, like basic copy in email editing. And then the second thing in regards to the positioning, so yeah, I mean, we want to move more to become more of a product that we want to move from a tool to a suite of tools. I think we'll move to a solution, and the solution might involve actually, I'm not coming for Sendtric because I know the campaign that I want to do and I just need XYZ. I'm coming to Sendtric because I need to think about a campaign and what can I build? And so whether we're going to build I don't think we're going to build a full email editor, frankly. We might actually use one from the market. I don't know. I mean, I've been thinking about it. I don't have a firm opinion. We might use different things from the market, but add these AI layers and all these different things and provide the orchestration on top of it, and bundle different elements that you could have from multiple products so that if you want to create a campaign, you could include your brand elements, you can include all these things and just use Sendtric to have different ideas of different creatives that you could use for your email. So I don't think we're there. I think that it's obviously more of a 2026 roadmap. But yeah, that's in my mind what's in store for us. At least that's one element. I'm hiring somebody to build the roadmap, so she might have a different idea. But in the meantime, my hunch is that we're going to have to move there. I feel that we're in a bundling phase of SaaS, and customers they want to have more and more one solution. And so I'd rather be either part of other products through API, and for customers that don't have the more advanced Klaviyo feature or Salesforce Cloud or whatever, then they can come to us to do more. I think that's what. But it's going to be a journey.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a really interesting direction, right? It's sort of a thoughtful ecosystem of useful email tools. It's interesting that you touched on AI here, right? Because clearly I see the opportunity, right? I mean, we can use AI for email design. We can use sort of learning the effectiveness of different campaign components. I think a key challenge for, I guess, startups using AI in general right now is, okay, how do we sort of leverage the capabilities of AI without sort of just hopping on the hype wagon, right? How do we actually build a thoughtful product on top of it? I think here it sounds like you're being very intentional about the roadmap, right? How do we actually integrate AI in a useful way? I'm facing sort of same questions in the startup I'm working on right now, right? Which is, okay, we have this incredible hammer, and yes, we want to be able to sell this product that is an AI-driven sort of security solution, but how do we actually deliver concrete value, right? Because yes, maybe saying AI will get you through the sales call, but at the end of the day, you have to actually sort of make something positive happen for the customer. So yeah, it's just sort of interesting to see that same theme come up.
The way I try to frame it is understanding, okay, what is the job to be done, not only of my product, but of a person who's using my product. And I'm saying, okay, what does that person need to do? And why, and how can we do more of it by ourselves, if need be? And that's really how I'm thinking about it. Versus just adding AI for XY reason. For example, we have polls. We could use AI to say, give me a few polls questions and create a polls. And we haven't done it, and we could do it, and it could be cute. It's not a bad idea. It's just not a super high leverage idea. So the way I'm trying to think about it in general is to say, okay, what is the job to be done by the person who's using my tool, and how can she do more and shine more because she has a lot of things on her hands. So yeah, that's. But we'll see. I mean, it's still very early innings of that transition, and I'm surprised actually that the email service providers haven't. The way they've used AI hasn't been as ambitious as I thought.
I do think that sort of in the long term, the people that actually look at things the way you are right now, right, which is, okay, what's the actual problem to be solved, and how can we use AI in a thoughtful way to solve that problem? Those are the people that are, and the businesses that are going to have sustained success, as opposed to just sort of thoughtlessly kind of throwing AI at any problem. Yeah,
I hope so. I sure hope so.
Yeah. I mean, maybe this is, I don't know. It's just fundamentally, I want to believe that the principled approach will be rewarded in the long term.
Yeah. When you look at, I mean, as a last question on on this segment, on kind of the post exit, what are your thoughts on how we've done, the things that maybe scared you? Like, what are some of the learnings from what we've done post exit that you're taking, either for you as a seller or for you today with your new startup?
Yeah, I think that one of the facets that I was most sort of involved in and had the most ability to observe was, okay, how do you take a product like this from being a one-person show to being a larger engineering team, right? And how do you onboard that talent? This is something I'm thinking about right now, of course, as we're getting ready to onboard engineering talent on the new startup. To me, sort of at the beginning, I was very curious to see how sort of your all remote approach would pay off, right? I mean, so Medusa Labs is a very sort of geographically diverse team, So my observation, I think that on the hiring side of things, and of course Justin and I were involved in sort of the interviewing process there, there were some there were some difficult sort of starting points there, right? Of how do we find the right talent that's going to be engaged, and how do we vet people, especially during the remote hiring process. So I am curious. To me, it seems like that has sort of reached a steady state, and you've had good success with that. How has the remote hiring process been, and the remote working process been, and I guess specifically with Sendtric, New Labs more generally, and what would be your advice there for sort of founders wanting to hire remote talent?
There are two things, two dimensions. One dimension is on the technical side. On the technical side, I think that we made a lot of mistakes when we didn't have a good interview process, and when we didn't ask the founders to interview the candidates. I think that was all the mistakes we made were made because of that. Because you know where the bodies are buried, and you want that business to thrive after you. And so you're going to ask tougher questions, more pointed questions. And so I think that has been very useful, using also assessments. I mean, we're using obviously now our assessments, but at the time we were using other assessments because since then we've bought a skills assessment business. But I would say the second thing is really you need people that are happy in a remote environment. If you're going to go remote, but frankly you would love to be in an office and get all your energy from there, this is not going to work. Today I had a candidate that decided that he didn't want to work in a remote environment for a position, and I was sad because he was a candidate that I thought had a lot of potential. But on the other hand, I mean, I can't force him. If he wants to have colleagues all around, I'm not going to give that to him, and that's something that I can't create. So yeah, that's something that I've learned too. And then it's about having a process and making sure that you have a good way of communication that is working asynchronously. So we're using a lot of Notion. Obviously, we're using Slack. And also having a fair amount of in-person meetings and discussion. We're doing an annual offsite, but more and more I'm encouraging my team, the product leads that we have, to meet in person, the engineers, so that to build trust. Because you mentioned trust for a transaction, but it happens the same way for work. And I think that the trust that you're getting by spending a week in the same co-working space or in the same office, working on problems together, having lunch together, having dinners together for a week. After a week, you're relieved that you can be on your own, especially if you're an introvert, which is the case of most remote hires. But you know the person, right? You've expanded all the work questions, and so you're starting to go into more personal side, and it helps in building a long-term relationship in a remote work environment. So I've seen that pay a lot of dividend. And so how do you assess that? You need to be very, I would say, process driven. So you need to ask very pointed questions, both on work culture, on values, but also obviously on the job to be done.
Do you think if you were to start from the beginning, you would go the all remote, or like basically all remote route again?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's important. It's part of our business model. And second of all, I like the idea of hiring talented people that are undiscovered. Like that's something that I find it incredibly exciting personally. Of course, in San Francisco, you have a ton of talented people, but they have tons of opportunities. I can't necessarily offer them the best opportunity. And what I think is when you meet people that that are talented, but they're not discovered, and you groom them and you grow them and they grow with you, it's amazing. It's the best feeling as a founder and CEO. And so, yeah, I would do that every day of the week.
It's fantastic.
But it corresponds well to our model. I mean, if would I do that if I was doing an AI start like an AI labs on like OpenAI? No, because you need the discussion. Like it's a different story. But for a traditional SaaS, yeah, I mean, I don't think that you need to have everybody in the same room all the time. I think it's like not anymore. Eric, thank you very much. We're going to go into the last category, which is more about questions. And I actually have one question for you. Typically I ask two questions at the end of my podcast. I'm going to ask you the first one, which is one of my favorite one. It used to be one of my favorite interview questions. What is the most important thing you learned from your mother?
Oh, wow. It's tough, of course, not for figuring out something, but for figuring out the thing, because there are so many.
Yeah.
I think something. So my mother is a professor at Penn State, right? And so was raised by two academics. Surprise. I think that something my mother sort of instilled in me was always remaining curious and sort of having a positive curiosity about the world, right? It's looking at any situation and thinking about, okay, how can this be better, right? And how can I sort of affect that change? And that's been helpful both in sort of a business sense, right? I mean, you can see it in the origin story of Sendtric. But it's also helpful in just sort of a life outlook sense, right? It's having that mindset of positivity really makes it just much more enjoyable to get up in the morning, right? And ultimately, yes, success in business is great, and making money and all that is great, but it's all instrumental to happiness, right? And so that outlook has, I think, brought me success, but it's also brought me happiness in that success, which I think is the most important thing.
It's a good one. And my second question, which is almost the opposite, what is, in your mind, your most contrarian view on AI today? You've been surrounded by academics in AI, I'm sure, at your university. You've been through the rise of ChatGPT and the LLMs. I'm curious, what's your take?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because AI is the ultimate landscape for contrarian takes. So for me to pick a conventional contrarian take would almost be non-contrarian. I suppose, I mean, one traditional contrarian take on AI is that it doesn't actually learn anything, right? It's not actually reasoning. It's just predicting the next token, which I agree with. But my contrarian take on that is maybe it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, I think that there are hype cycles in tech all the time, right? And one outlook is that AI is the latest hype cycle and that it's not actually accomplishing anything. But unlike so many other previous hype cycles, right? I guess I'll pick on blockchain as an example. AI is popular and there's hype around it because it delivers concrete value on day one, right? I mean, the number of actual real tasks that I'm able to do more quickly now because of AI is staggering. And all that despite the fact that it's just predicting the next token. And so I think that, I guess my one contrarian take there is that maybe it doesn't matter that AI isn't actually intelligent. But number two, I think that as a result of that, there is going to be some fundamental limit on sort of how aligned and how effective any sort of AI-driven technique is going to be able to be, right? And so, ultimately, and this also plays into where we can have success in business around AI, is that ultimately design of new foundation models and such is only going to get us so far. There is going to be space left for intelligent and thoughtful approaches for designing systems around AI-driven techniques, right? So how do we find the right problems and how do we develop the right techniques that are going to deliver value even in the face of fallible models? And I think that, I mean, there are some conventional fields that have had to address this problem, affected sort of since the rise of the internet and security and so on. I think a lot about how the hallucinations and failures of AI models are increasingly so similar to effectively social engineering against humans, right? So, you know, AI cannot make decisions infallibly, neither can humans. You can very easily trick humans into making the wrong decisions. Um, and some industries, like regulated financial industries and banks, have fully embraced this fact with humans already, right? So if you call customer support at a bank, it doesn't matter if you can fool the human into thinking that you're someone that you're not, because there are actual sort of hard security boundaries that are enforced even on the customer support rep at a major bank, right? And so in that way, I think that a lot of the sort of weaknesses of AI are actually nothing new, right? And again, going back to our conversation about email marketing and AI, it's the people who can take a principled approach, right, and can design the right systems and think about what is the concrete value proposition of the AI in a given system that I think in the long term are going to have the most success and are going to be able to deliver impactful products. Um, I'm not sure how contrarian of a take that is, right? But that's sort of my view on it, and it's something that I'm very much trying to take into this new venture that we're working on, which just happens to be in the AI driven cybersecurity
Yeah.
space.
Well, all the best with your new venture, Eric, and thank you for being part of the debrief.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me, Pascal.
Thanks, Eric.